Have you listened to any episodes?
Negative. I haven't listened to any podcasts to speak of. I get pretty buried in my work and my life, and when I'm not, I try to be in the woods.
Well, it probably would have gave you a good idea what to talk about.
That's fair.
So just kind of go ahead and we'll start by having you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and we can kind of go from there.
All right. Well, I'm Mike Covey. I'm born and bred Vermonter. I live in the house that my great grandparents built on the North Pasture when they retired from farming in the mid '60s. So that tells you how rooted I am. Uh, Done the jack of all trades thing, everything from being uh, a body man to a mechanic. Spent 15 years as a steel worker, and now I find myself in a suit and tie in the Capitol, lobbying for our right to keep hunting and fishing and trapping and so forth. So it's been an interesting journey. The only time I spent away from Vermont, I was down on the coast at the University of New Hampshire for a few years studying wildlife management.
What else is Vermont known for?
Maple syrup, and I've done that too.
I was going to ask maple syrup, huh?
Yep. At one time, I was the production manager for Highland Sugar Works for several years. At that time, one of the biggest sugar producers in the state. There are some producers now. That was going on 25 years ago. So there are some sugar producers now that have not. We had thousands of taps. They have hundreds of thousands of taps.
What part of the maple syrup job were you doing?
So I was the production manager. I did a lot of the purchasing and ran the flow of the packaging floor. To give you an idea, the last time I did inventory before I left and moved on to the machine shop, I think we had 713,000 pounds of syrup. So I would taste it as we took it in, blend it, go out to the sugar makers and buy it and so forth, and then make sure that the product we had coming out was a good product.
So explain this to me. You see videos of them just kind of cranking stuff in. How are they doing it on a big production side like that?
So in a big production, we had vacuum pumps. I don't remember what the acreage was, but we had like 43 miles of pipeline. So you'd have vacuum stations, and to try to pull like 22 inches of vacuum is good, and then everything ran down to a releaser that it was a 30-gallon um, pump basically that when it was full, it would pump it into a 10,000-gallon silo. And so that was that on a heavy run, that releaser would release every you know, 30 seconds.
What do you mean vacuum pump? So you drill the hole and instead of just putting like a little spout in, you
Yep.
put a hose in it?
Yeah. Yeah. So there are hoses all connected, across the sugar bush, and the taps would go into the tree, and then you would put vacuum to the system to pull more syrup, more sap.
It's like milking cows, man.
Very similar. Yes. Very similar. And it was an organic sugar bush. So everything was done mindful. There were parameters, there were guidelines for how you tapped, where you tapped, and so on and so forth. No tapping trees below a certain size, X amount of taps per diameter, quite a bit to it. And then from there, it would go into a reverse osmosis machine that would squeeze the water out of it. So when the sap comes out of the trees, it's about 2% to 3% sugar. And by the time it went through the RO and came into the pan, it was around 9%. So it saves you're taking out a whole bunch of water, and then you've got absolutely pure water that you can clean things up with at the end of the night. So it was a very symbiotic system.
When you were doing that, how long was it interesting for before it got extremely boring?
I am a proponent of the idea that good maple syrup goes on just about anything. I mean, when I'm smoking salmon, it gets a maple sage dry rub, and then it gets a drizzle of syrup, half an hour before it's done. When I'm smoking bear, it's a 50-50 of maple syrup and Italian dressing with some garlic thrown in there for good measure, and brine it in that and glaze it, repeatedly throughout the process. There's very little that you can go wrong. I got a couple of really nice bobcats this last weekend. I use, every few years I'll get a bobcat hunting. I got a 30-pounder Saturday morning, and I got a 35-pounder Sunday morning. I don't know if you've ever eaten bobcat, but it's great. They're just a big toothy rabbit with claws. The meat's a white meat. It's really good, and if you do it with like a Montreal marinade, and then you spike that with a little maple syrup, it brings out the natural sweetness of the meat. So yeah, so it didn't necessarily get boring, but it got to a point where it wasn't meeting some of the needs that I was perceiving for my future, and I didn't really have a lot of room for growth. So I went to the bottom of the totem pole at a new role, and worked my way up into kind of looking at that position. But along the way, I got sidetracked, and so I sometime around 2012, I had some extra time on my hands that I didn't anticipate having. And there was a local pond that, as a kid growing up, you drive by, and it's, this beautiful blue sparkling, it's like 212 acres. And it was always locked away. Nobody could access it. So here in Vermont, we have not necessarily unique anymore, but written into our constitution, our state constitution, Article 67, is that the people of the state shall have the right to hunt, fish, and fowl on all unenclosed lands. And that's baked into our constitution, which the legislature has no authority to change. In order to change the constitution, it takes like 5 years. The legislature has to vote on the change twice, and then it has to pass a popular vote as well. So it's a huge process. So we have that baked in, and we also have public trust doctrine baked in that the state holds all waters, lands beneath them, and up to the mean high water mark in the public trust. So if there's a water body, like a fluctuating water body, like a river or whatever, if you're within that navigable water, you can walk the bank as long as you're below the high water mark, and it's not private property. It's property of the public. It's held in the public trust. So somebody decided to test the fact that pond had been shut down for basically 100 years. And that was my first introduction to legislative stuff. I got involved. I started going to the select board meetings initially, is where it started. And I'm not known for holding my tongue when I think something should be a certain way or shouldn't be a certain way. So I started showing up at these meetings, and I started having ideas and speaking them out. And then a fellow grabbed me after one of the meetings. He had started a Facebook page. It was called Friends of Berlin Pond. And he said, you seem pretty well spoken. Within several months of that, he called me up one night and he said, "Hey, I've been going to these meetings of this organization. They're really smart. They fight for the stuff that we care about. I don't say much. I just go sit around the table, and there's a bunch of gray hairs, and they really have a ton of knowledge. If you want to come," they said it was okay to bring you. So I went to my first meeting, and the Maine bear referendum, I don't know if you recall that or were aware of it, back in like 2013, 2014, HSUS tried to end trapping, hounding, and baiting of bears in Maine. And there was a question brought up at the meeting that night, what's going on over there? And I had been engaging with that somewhat on social media. So I had a bunch of information and I spit it out. And to make what could be a long, long story short, by 2015, I was analyzing all the state's land management plans. The first one they asked if somebody could do it, and I volunteered. It was the Comprehensive Wildlife Management Plan in 2015. It was like 1,100 pages with 8 appendices. I spent 2.5 months on it and wrote a 10-page position statement. And that was the beginning of the end. I ended up snowballing into working with a bunch of other organizations, our Trappers Association, another advocacy group, and then several other advocacy groups. And then in 2018, I was asked if, the executive director was stepping down, and I was asked if I would take on that role. And so I tell everybody that my mentor kind of Mr. Miyagi'd me into it. One day I was waxing on and waxing off, hey, can you write a letter to the editor about this? Or, hey, do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think you could testify on this? And the next thing I knew, I was running the Vermont Traditions Coalition and advocating for people in a suit and tie in Montpelier. So it was a really interesting journey.
Sounds like you kind of got weaseled into that.
So I've September of 2018 was when I was asked to do it. I gave my notice at the machine shop, but I was in a pretty uh, I wouldn't say a key role there, but I was one of the top two machinists in the shop. And so I didn't want to leave them in the lurch. So I ran the organization nights, worked at the machine shop days, trying to pull someone in to take over my role. And somehow that fall, I shot 11 deer between Vermont, New Hampshire, and New York, which I haven't done since, even with a lot more time on my hands than I had that fall. But you always have those seasons. You have seasons like I had this last year where you can't get anything right, but every once in a while you have a season where you can't get anything wrong. And that just lined up. So 2019 was my first legislative session, and I've been doing it ever since.
I don't know. I haven't really had those seasons where nothing goes wrong.
I bought 12 deer tags, and I had 12 weeks of hunting, and I ended up filling 11 tags. So it was a little bit silly, to the point where I got pretty cocky. So maybe this year was my comeuppance for that, because I was having a lot of fun. I had one buddy, and of course, there's always plenty of people that want venison, right? You can't have too much venison because you can always give as much as you need to away. Like there was a church in Waterbury that did a venison feed every year, and I found out about it through by that point a former girlfriend. But I called them up and I said, "Hey, how much venison do you need for your feed?" And I'd just like to supply it all. And the pastor said, "Oh, that's too much to ask." And I said, "Believe me, it is not too much to ask." And most people, statistically here in Vermont, like 25% of people are successful deer hunting, and most of them only get one. So I said, most of your parishioners, I'm sure they love to donate meat to this, but let's give them a year off. I'm sure they'll find a place for the meat if they have too much for themselves. And I really want to do this because I was really just had a blessed season, and seems like I should do something good with that. But I was talking to one of my buddies. You send your buddies your pictures when you get a deer. You put one on the ground, and I sent him a picture. He said, "Why are you still hunting?" And I said, "Well, I still got tags." And he said, "Yeah, but how many have you shot?" He said, "It's a little bit disconcerting." And so by then I was already well engaged with, the antis knew who I was, and we were going at it pretty regularly. And I was taking days off from work to be in the legislature at that point. And I said, "Well, I'm doing a social experiment. Nobody really, seems to have a lot of stomach for going after deer hunting because it's just a terrible idea. If you want to rile up the world, just try to do something about deer hunting." So I jokingly said, "It's a social experiment. I want to see what people's tolerance is for stacking up deer." And apparently your number's 8. We don't have, I know south and west, there are some incredible deer herds around here. People aren't used to seeing that, and people conflate the idea of what is, we can buy 4 tags here, and people worry that, you're going to kill the whole deer herd. Well, if you look at the numbers, you know, the third and fourth tag account for a couple hundred deer statewide. It's biologically insignificant. And from a practical standpoint, most of those deer are going to get taken where there's a high density. You're not going to go out in a 1 deer per square mile area and shoot 4 deer. It's not gonna happen. You can't shoot deer you don't see.
How many deer can you kill in Vermont a year?
You can shoot 4 a year
How'd you get 12
if you
tags?
can do it. I hunted Vermont, New York, and New Hampshire.
Oh, okay, multiple states.
Yep, multiple states. So I had 1 New Hampshire tag left at the end of the season, and that was because I zigged when I should have zagged. I took a different path in than I normally take, and if I'd just gone the way I usually do, I would have known what they were doing. And instead of jumping them on the way out with my bow, I would have been set up there when they came in.
Now, were you having to process all these deer?
Yeah, I not always, but almost always process my own deer. Last year in September, I detached my right bicep, which I thought it was going to put a big damper on my season. But a couple of days before my surgery, I shot a bear off crop field for a farmer. My sister questioned, should I be shooting with my right bicep completely detached? But I said, I don't really know. It might hurt, but by the time it does, I'll have bear meat. And and it didn't. Um, and I had my surgery, and I think I sent you a picture of the deer that I shot last year. It was a 212-pound 8-pointer over in New Hampshire in the White Mountains. And I was finally getting consistent pictures of a deer 2 miles from the road in like really rugged terrain. And I knew there was no way I was going to get it out of there with one arm. I had surgery September 17th, and the doctor told me that I couldn't shoot a gun, which he turned out to be wrong about, and that I couldn't lift more than a pound for 3 months, which effectively took out the whole autumn. So one of my friends said, "Hey, I got a buddy that's got a crossbow for sale." I advocated for the idea that people should be able to use a crossbow to hunt here. You couldn't for a long time. I'm not sure I agree with the way it was implemented, but um, I don't like them not because I have anything against them. They are so clunky. Like I love my vertical bow. I'm shooting a 2012 Bear Anarchy that I bought a bunch of extra parts for so I could keep shooting it. I'm not big on switching gear. If you find gear that works really well, I'm not a fan of changing it to say I have the latest, greatest. I'm a fan of keeping the gear that works really well, working really well. So I, I I got the crossbow because there was just no way that no way I could shoot my regular bow. And I hunt coyote at night, and so I've got a tripod and just set up blinds, set the crossbow up on the tripod, and ended up getting a deer. I don't know, a couple weeks into the archery season that way, and my son gutted it for me. I had just a ton of help. It was really great to see how everybody everybody jumped in to make sure that I was able to hunt in a situation where I might not have been realistically able to do that. So I got that deer, and then I had a checkup in October. We have an early muzzleloader season, and it's does only if you have a permit. It's in October. And the day before that season opened, I had a doctor's checkup. I said, "Hey doc, can I shoot? You know, muzzleloader opens tomorrow. Really, looking to fill a tag." And he said, "You cannot." So I went home and did what any hunter would do and set my muzzleloader up on the tripod and shot it left-handed a couple of times, and that wasn't so bad, but it's a little clunky. So I said, "Well, I'm going to just try it right-handed." So I tried it right-handed off the tripod, and it wasn't so bad. And so I contemplated the fact that the injury was down at my elbow. The gun was going to be up at my shoulder, and I didn't really have to hold any weight beyond my arm to reach up and pull the trigger. And the next day, I filled my doe tag.
What do you have for a tripod?
I've got a bog. And I might upgrade at some point.
Do it.
Yeah, the bog. I'm 6'2", so the bog is short for me, and also two of the primary bolts that hold the legs on have fallen out in the field on me, which is suboptimal at best. And I contacted them and I said, "Hey man, I need to buy a set of bolts. No big deal. I'll buy them. Like I don't care." And they said, "Well, they're not available right now." So that more than anything else, like I can make do because I bought a scanner, so I don't have to be hung up on the gun the whole time. Um, you know, and so I can check with the scanner, jump on the gun, but it would be nice to have something taller and to have something that's, it's not cobbled together at this point.
It cost you a pretty penny for tripod and ball head. You're talking $800, but
With what I spent, I did the buy once, cry once on the thermal. So that's the least of my worries.
I got a fat boy and I'm six. Ladies, if you're listening, I'm 6 foot, 5'11" and a half, and fully extended. It's to the top of my head. I was into thermal hunting for a while. And if you buy a really cool piece of gear that like it just shocks you, that is the one thing that has impressed me more than anything. I sold my thermals, but I couldn't believe it. It looks so sturdy. It's so light. I just throw my gun on, throw it over my shoulder. When I was into thermal hunting, that was probably the best money I spent.
Yep. Yeah, I've got a buddy, other side of the state, which for us isn't the same as for you guys. You know, Vermont's 90 miles wide at its widest point. So um, he's got a fat boy, and he said he loves it. So I may give that a try some night. Yeah, I'm not suppressed yet. Um, so it's funny. I'm shooting a 22 250 with a 24-inch barrel, and hunted over there with him one night, and he thought it was pretty loud. I thought it was quiet compared to my old AR that I was using, my 223. But
Now's the time to buy a suppressor.
mm, you know what? I don't know that I agree with that. I think they'll be taken completely out of the NFA, and I've waited this long. I'm willing to wait for that. I don't think it'll even take long.
Silencer Central's not very happy about it.
Yeah,
Have you heard about that?
no,
Well, their big whatever is making paperwork easy, making jumping through the hurdles easy. And if you can just go to the sporting goods store and buy one, it basically eliminates all business going through Silencer Central.
well, I mean, there are at least two shops within 30 minutes of me that are, they're taking care of all that end of it, helping you get through it and everything. So it's not, I don't perceive it as a difficulty at this point anyway.
But most of those shops are set up through, and yours may not be, but I went to a gun shop in Des Moines and their kiosk is Silencer Shop. There's probably a lot of shops that have the Silencer Central kiosk.
Yeah. Yep. That's probably fair.
So yeah, it put a hurt into them if you could just go to any gun shop and pick one off the shelf.
I can only be so sympathetic to that. They really never should have been an NFA item anyways. I mean, you look at Europe. In Europe, they're required for hunting in a lot of places. It's not it's a very strange thing to have being a part of the NFA. It just doesn't make sense.
People have been watching too many movies, man. They
Yeah.
think a silencer is going to be like, psh,
Yeah.
no, it's a AR 243 or 223 is still louder with the suppressor on than a 22.
Right. Yep. Yeah, it just softens the blow. So yeah, I think that's where it'll land. So I'm not in a big yank. Plus, I've never had a problem. When we've hunted at night, I've never had anyone complain. Um, never had anyone yell at us. So
What'd you buy for a thermal?
I've got an infrared,
Okay.
a 640, and when I can see the snowflakes kicking off the coyote's feet as he's coming in, I appreciate that level of resolution.
When I had it, I had the Pulsar XG50, thinking it's going to be a cry once, buy once, or whatever. They get so outdated so fast. I mean, when I first got into it 5 years ago, 640s, there might have been a couple on the market. So I had a 384, then I bought a 640, and by the time I bought my second 640, 1280s were the rage.
Yeah, I won't be making the jump to a 1280. That price tag's way too much for me. I'm an old car guy, and I cringed thinking about what I could do with the money I spent on the 640 on a couple of my cars. But I have no regrets. Like I enjoy the heck out of it. Um, but it's funny what you get used to. Like when one of my buddies was the first one to get one, so he got a ATN Thor 4, and it was great right up until he got an IRA,
He's like,
and then
wow.
yeah, and then it was so he had the one, and we would switch off and on, and then he had a little money kicking around, and we called in 6 coyotes right at my house one night. So he was on the gun. He got a couple of them, but we're like, man, would have been cool to have 2 guns. And the next day he texted me, hey, I just bought another one because, that way my loser buddy can shoot too. Well, it wasn't a month after that. Santa Claus had a used one for like cheap. And he was like, hey man, do you want this? And I was on my way down to the legislature, and there was something going on. And I was like, look, man, I don't have time to deal with it. He was like, well, if you want it, I'll pull the trigger on it and just pay me for it. And I was like, all right, get it. And but at when all we had was that ATN, that it was like, wow, this is great. And then when you bump up to that 640 and the clarity of that iRay, it was like painful to look through that. So my scanner's a 256, right? I didn't want to spend a bunch of money on it, and I'm like, it hurts to look through it. But I'm like, okay, all I need to do is find the the hot object, and then I can get on the actual optic and feel better about what I'm doing.
Yeah, I'd hate to look through a 1280, and I don't have any thermals anymore. I wasn't going out enough to justify. And even the 640s have come a long ways in terms of quality. From when they first came out to the 640s now, they look pretty damn good.
Well, his ATN was a 640, and there's a distinct difference, and it was 3 or 4 years old. Like you said, that the updates come so fast.
If I lived out in the country where I had access to go hunt whenever I felt like it, I'd still have them. But I live in town and was only getting out a couple times a year and didn't justify them. But they don't hold their value very good. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, I can walk out my front door and off the edge of my driveway and be in a field where I can call dogs in. So
What do you have for a collar?
I went with the lucky duck.
Which one?
That's a great question that I can't answer off the top of my head.
Does it have a tripod?
Yeah, well, I put a tripod on it. Um, I cannot remember.
Does it have the digital screen on it?
Yeah, it's a digital screen. It's
Must be a roughneck.
I think I think it is a roughneck.
One of the higher end ones, but doesn't have a tripod.
Right. Yeah.
Yo,
Yeah. I didn't. Again, I was like, once I was in it, I was like committed. And so buy once, cry once, and same deal. My same buddy got that call, and I had a Fox Pro, and he had a lucky dog at one point, and we just, so having three different brands, one brand stood out in terms of clarity and in terms of results. And so that's, I got the same thing he got. I was like, because there was one thermal, right? So I had to wait on him to go, and then we would switch off, and then two thermals, but I still had to wait on him to go because he had the call and the other thermal. Then I got my own thermal, but I still didn't have a call. The call I had was one of the cheap Fox Pros. Nothing negative about them. I think in this arena, everybody has a really good product and everybody has an entry level product. And I think that people are, whatever brand they want to use, I think they're better to go for the higher end product. And if they have to save up for it, save up for it. When I needed a new hunting pack, I actually just wrote Bass Pro about this, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. In like 2017, I bought the Redhead RH 2200, and it's the best pack I've ever had. And so I'm like actively looking everywhere for one that somebody bought and didn't use or whatever. So I have a backup. But it's, I've had it, next year will be 10 years. It's still holding up. And I've been out in New York and shot a deer, butchered it in place. I take a contractor bag with me and open that pack up, take everything out, put the contractor bag in there, and put a whole deer inside of it, strap all my gear to the outside of it, and walk out. When I went and bought it, I went to the store, picked out 3 packs that had the type of features I wanted, and then I went over to the sports section and filled them with 60 pounds of weights and walked around the store with them on, and said, okay, this is the pack, right? And I just think that if you can do it, which I come from a place where there was a time I couldn't, right? I remember distinctly, so I have a son, raised him from 9 months on my own, no state help, no child support, bought a house in that time frame. And I remember one day being in a store and thinking that I really wanted a Three Musketeers, but I might need that 75 cents later in the week. So I'm under no illusions about the fact that life and finances are incredibly difficult. But if people can meter themselves enough to get what they really want, like wait and get what they really want instead of just getting low end item to get going, I think it pays off in the long run.
knowing what I know now, if I were to get into thermal again, I would figure out which model and brand I want roughly, and I would buy the most expensive one. They're all going to drop value. So get the highest end one you can, even though it might be $8,000, and just use it for 3 years. And then it will be like a middle tier. Because if you buy like a middle of the road thermal, in another year, it's going to be like a low end. and nobody's going to want to buy it if you sell it.
Yeah, I don't have any intention of selling it. I'm hoping that if anything ever goes wrong with the firmware or whatever, that I can send it in and get it squared away. I don't know. I don't know that, but like I said, I mean, I'm shooting a 2012 bow. I, I don't think there are a lot of guys doing that on purpose. Um, but it's comfortable. I like it. I just don't like changing gear. If you've got good gear and works well for you and you're used to it, why would you shift just to say I got the newest thing? And I'm sure that won't be popular statement with manufacturers, but I've just never felt that way. I mean, my daily driver is a 97 Suburban that's been LS swapped because that's what I want to drive. I don't want to spend the money on a new rig. Would I love a brand new Suburban? Sure. But I would still choose that 97 the majority of the time.
That's pretty old, man.
It's only got 350,000 miles on it, so it's just broken in.
That's 30 years old. I mean, I thought I was driving a piece of crap. I have a 2012 Equinox, paid $6,500 for it, decent. And my dad sideswiped with the hay rack, shattered the rear window
uh,
and the main fender, and insurance like totaled it out. So they gave me $7,500 after buying it back, so $8,500 roughly. And I just pulled out the broken glass, got some yard sign material, shaped the window, and put some drainage tile tape over it. Driving something that somebody basically paid me to drive. Like, I don't care what I drive. So we'll get back on track here.
yeah.
So how long did you get? Let me back up. Let's go back to your younger years when you were you started hunting with your dad. How'd you get started?
I remember, so, grew up in a trailer and, they had the aluminum door with the glass in it, the outer door, the screen door, whatever you call it. I remember at like 5 years old being pressed against that glass, looking out into the driveway. We have these core memories, right? That stick with us. At the time, my dad had a gold 70 Chevelle, and I remember that car in the yard, fresh snow, him and all his buddies in their red Johnson wool, and almost everybody was carrying a lever action Winchester or Marlin. I remember just being pressed against that cold glass and wanting to be a part of that so badly. And then when I was about 7 years old, he let me start tagging along behind him, and you remember those first move when I move, watch out for sticks, try to be quiet, don't fidget, all that stuff. My father was never a big hunter. He shot one deer in his life. He'd have a buck come by him and he didn't feel like dealing with that. So he'd just sit there and watch it go by.
I don't want to gut it.
Yeah, I am not of that temperament. I'm pretty well known for filling some tags and filling some freezers. Um, but he was never really into it. Paternal grandfather wasn't in the picture. Maternal grandfather was wheelchair bound. So it's not like I was surrounded by that culture, but there was something that just drew me to it so much. And I think it's born into some of us. I have a friend who was raised a vegetarian, decided he wanted to hunt and started eating meat to prepare for that, So I think there's just something in us. Well, I know there's something in us, like as a species, that's normal, right? And and so in some people that will express itself stronger, and that was the case for me.
You're sick, man. You want to kill animals for fun?
Oh, I hear it all the time. Believe me, I am for the anti-hunting contingent in this part of the country. I am public enemy number one. Um, the amount of last year, an individual sent 2 emails to the entire body of the legislature about what a horrible human being I am. I mean, in 2022, I got a nice mountain lion out in Colorado with my bow, and there was like pictures of me with all this stuff. And look, he even killed a mountain lion. What a horrible human being, right? And the second one, this individual had the audacity to include a picture of my son with his first bear, that he had sourced offline. And I'm like, all right, like at this point, it's part of the job. It's water off a duck's back, right? I am there combating their attempts to take away our heritage and lifestyle, and they hate it, because for most people who are opposed to hunting, trapping, even fishing, we have this coyote focused organization here that's an anti-hunting organization. Somebody catches a state record gar, I think it was, out of Lake Champlain. And the local news station says, this guy got a state record gar. How cool is that? And this anti-hunting organization, who only cares about protecting coyotes, comes on there and blasts them for glorifying the murder of this ancient gar. You know, uh, somebody shoots a melanistic rabbit, and they can't sort the reality that is, especially in a snow-covered. This is a black snowshoe hare. It is the opposite of going to make it, right? It is going to be such a prime target once there's snow cover. It's not a sacred cow. It's not some unicorn. It's not a different species. It's just an animal that has an anomalous genetic code that is going to make it very susceptible to predation anyways. But they put these people on blast, there was a younger woman, teenager, late teens or whatever. She shot a piebald deer, and her boyfriend said, "Hey, we're kids, we can't afford to mount this, but she'd like a full body mount. This is unique. We're gonna do a GoFundMe." Well, they took that and they twisted it into, this was all about the trophy. And it's like, no, the trophy was made of venison, and that was its downfall. The trophy is really cool. It's really unique, and it's something, this idea that when we take a picture with an animal we've harvested, that it's somehow uh, bad, that it's somehow undesirable. I go back to the idea that if we set an idea, which I think as a society most people would agree to, that art and leisure are the pinnacle of civilization, right? When you're so civilized that you have time to make art instead of just simply surviving, that's got value. That shows a healthy society, right? And when you see the fact that the earliest artwork we have are cave paintings of hunts, you know, taking a picture with that animal should not be castigated as some evil. We're preserving a moment. We're celebrating, but are we celebrating the death of the animal or the killing of the animal? No, we're celebrating the fact that we undertook a very difficult task and succeeded at it, and that we're bringing food to our family or to our community, or however that's going to be dispensed with, right? That's something worth celebrating, and I don't view it as being any less valuable than when your softball team wins the tournament. What do? You take pictures, right? You memorialize those times. You win a race, you take pictures. I really think it's kind of despicable that segment of society feels it's okay to vilify us and try to portray us as monsters, and that's one of the tracks they take. Like, you're mad I took a picture after I succeeded at something that a lot of people don't. On average, people who engage in this activity don't succeed.
As they're probably wearing leather boots or a leather belt or makeup. They just don't get it.
Well, some of them really truly are invested, right? Like, they're in it 100%. That still doesn't make it okay to say that trappers are evil. It doesn't make it okay to say. So there was a person hunting with hounds with his kids, and somebody took a picture of him loading his dogs with his kids in the picture, and this organization reposts that picture and says, photograph them and shame them wherever possible. It's all about vilification, and as a result, here we have had some really extreme animal rights extremists move here, and we've seen fallout from this vitrolic approach that they take, where we've seen hunters physically assaulted. We've seen, there was someone who sprayed pepper spray inside a truck that had two older hunters and a kid in it because they were hunting with hounds. They were on a public road. There was nothing about them being there that was unlawful or even untowards, right? And this individual uncorked a can of pepper spray and blasted it into the truck. There was another individual who came back to their truck they'd gone and retrieved their dogs off a tree and were just coming back and loading the dogs up to go, and there were people letting the air out of their tires. And when they caught, obviously they came back to the truck and they started loading their dogs and said, "What are you doing? What if we have an accident? One of us could get hurt. Is this really like, do you really feel that's okay?" And one of the individuals let their dog out of the car. It ended up attacking one of the hunting dogs and knocking the guy's significant other over, and she got injured. It's really disturbing that they think it's okay to take it to that place where it's no longer a discussion of policy, right? Now it's a discussion of um, whether or not we can still be valued as human beings because we have a different lifestyle than they do. And I can't find anywhere else in society where we're willing to just sit and accept that. So um, the laid back way that seems to be viewed is really, really wrong to me.
So they had a dog, like a bigger dog, attack the hounds.
They had a German Shepherd in the car and they let it out. I believe it was a German Shepherd, and it just piled into the hounds.
Did these people get in trouble?
They did eventually, and the dog that it hit ended up having like a $2,000 vet bill. It's just, it has, the groups that have gravitated here have gone beyond the pale in terms of what they believe is acceptable for dialogue, right? It's not, we don't like these activities. It's the people who engage in these activities are sadistic, evil troglodytes. And so once you dehumanize a segment of population, right, historically, what happens? They're following a playbook as old as time. You dehumanize people so that you can get rid of them. And thankfully, most Vermonters are far more aware than to accept that. There's a huge local locavore movement here. Well, you tell me what's more local than walking out the back door, taking a deer and putting it in the freezer. There's nothing. There's no, if people want to talk about carbon, it's carbon neutral. That deer existed anyways. There was no input into the system to create it other than the fact that deer exist. And it didn't have to get trucked anywhere. It's just it's a really solid way to feed yourself to the degree that you can. I try to have as much of my food as possible come out of the woods. Like I said, I got 2 great bobcat this weekend. I'll eat them and enjoy it. It'll be really good. In fact, I've served bobcat in our state house twice now, because there was a stretch where it was like, well, nobody eats these. They were saying nobody eats bear. So obviously, these people are not a reliable source of information. But you could say nobody eats bobcat, but when you take bobcat chili in and come in second place in the chili contest, the people that were judging, the legislators judging that chili contest, ate bobcat and liked it.
Is it good for anything other than grinding up?
Yeah. So, well, I don't ever grind it. I chunk it when I make chili, but it's good enough that my son chastised me for wasting perfectly good bobcat in a chili. He thought I should just go get some pork and throw it in there and call it a day. And I said, well, there's got to be some level of integrity in this. In fact, when I got these bobcat this past weekend, he was like, I need back straps, man. So it's really good. If you like rabbit, you like bobcat. You just don't know it yet.
I've never had either.
Really? We
No.
used to raise rabbit growing up. So
Grew up on a cattle farm, man.
grew up working on my uncle's dairy farm, but we had rabbit pens. And my stepfather raised rabbits for a stretch. So yeah.
You must have pretty big forearms.
Why is that? No, never milked cows by hand, man. Never did. I remember the last time I walked out of the barn, I said, I'm never going to get hit in the face with a cow's tail again. I'll leave it at the clean version.
We raise fat cattle. They're probably a little bit dirtier than dairy cows.
Yeah, but how often did you have your face right there to get smacked by that tail that was just laying in the gutter?
All the time, man. When you're working them and you're kind of in the chute and then they shit and it squirts everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I know your pain. Yeah, my uncle had this one little Jersey named Connie. I'll remember that cow's name until I'm gone. She was the shortest little thing, dragged everything in the muck. and was the meanest animal I have ever had to try to be polite to.
Just like short dudes, man.
She'd kick that machine off 3 or 4 times of milking just so she could get another shot at you.
Most dairy cattle are pretty mellow.
Yeah, most of them are. She was not. Well, and that's, once I was old enough, we lived across town. We lived like 8 miles away, but I would walk to the farm because the farm had a trout stream on it. And as a kid, that was a way better trout stream. It was the same trout stream that ran by the end of my driveway.
But you're walking.
So yeah, I'd walk like, I don't know, must have been close to 8 miles to go fish a trout stream that was just like the trout stream that ran by the end of the driveway. Me and one of my buddies one day decided we were going to go over there and bow hunt, which ironically, that's now my backyard, right? Um, we walked all the way across town to bow hunt up there and took a shortcut, crosscut, lost half our arrows in the woods. It was but we were kids.
Was it uphill both ways?
It was not uphill both ways. It was uphill one way though, for sure. And then I have like the very first deer I ever shot was, you know, that spot is 300 yards behind my house. And, I bought this house. My grandmother passed, great grandmother passed, and my uncle held the place for 2 years and didn't really do anything with it. And I had made it clear years before that I wanted to purchase it. I would pull in there, say hi to Graham, go out back and go hunting. And so I got my first deer, I don't know, probably 400 yards down in the woods behind my house, with a bow, windy day, and still hunting. And my son, however many years later, got his first deer within 200 yards. His first deer with a bow, rather. Sorry, he had shot several deer at that point, but always with a rifle. But his first archery deer, he still hunted up on it and shot it within a couple hundred yards of where I shot mine. And they actually, where they both ended up expiring, was they were either side of the brook within like 40. His deer died within like 40 yards of where my deer died.
It's amazing how you remember that stuff over that many years.
Yep. I walked through there just last month during our late muzzleloader season, and walked through the spot, and I'm like, that's the divot. That's the divot she was laying. And I was 18. I'm 51 now. With any luck, I will be able to purchase that land and preserve it. My uncle's quite old now, so I'm hopeful that opportunity will arise.
Describe the terrain where you're at in Vermont. I have no idea. Is it flat, hilly? I'm guessing it's pretty hilly.
I'd call it hilly. There's some really steep stuff, but mostly hilly. And you can get into basically whatever level of terrain you want. If you want to be up on a mountain, you can find a mountain to climb, and there's bucks up there. I've got a camp up in our Northeast Kingdom, we call it. It's the northeastern corner of the state. That there aren't a lot of deer up there, but there are some absolute bruisers up there. Down where I live, it's more farmland. Although sadly, as a lot of places, agriculture is declining around here. There's more ag land around me, which is kind of how I grew up hunting. It's a lot easier to find funnels. It's a lot easier to find trails than it is in bigger woods. I also skip across the border and hunt New Hampshire. I would say I hunt everything from river bottoms to miserable to get up there mountaintops. That buck I shot last year with my arm all stove up, two of my buddies had to hike an hour and a half to get to me and dragged for 3 hours to get it out for me. It's varied terrain, but here at home where I hunt, it's relatively flat. Just a lot of ag land.
Okay, I'm just looking at the map to figure out. Trying to figure out exactly where Vermont is. Well, I had an idea, but just trying to figure. I've talked to.
Well, you know where Maine is, right?
Oh yeah.
So we're between Maine and New York. We're right on the eastern border of New York.
So I've interviewed. I don't think I've had anybody from Maryland. I've had New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Vermont. You're the first from Vermont. I've talked to somebody from Maine and Maryland about getting them on. I've had Virginia, West Virginia. Some of those states are going to be hard. Connecticut, because I'm trying to get all 50 states. I'm actually doing way better out east than I am out west. I haven't had anybody from Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, Washington, North Dakota, South Dakota. I don't think I've had anybody from Nebraska, New Mexico, Oklahoma, but I have Virginia, West Virginia,
Yep. I got a buddy out in Oklahoma, but he's a Vermont boy. He just moved out there a few years ago.
Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Vermont. I don't know what it is, but I haven't got anybody from the Western states wanting to come on the podcast. You would think that'd be easier than some of these smaller states. Like,
I don't know, man. Vermonters hunt. So about 11 to 12% of the population hunts, which is a pretty high percentage these days.
oh, there's only 1,300 people there.
630,000 or so, but yeah. But as small as the state is, we've got we sell 74,000 resident hunting licenses. Growing up, it was like everybody knew where everybody hunted, and there's always that one guy that didn't have any respect for anyone else, but generally people were very respectful of where everyone else hunted, and we all got along. But everybody hunted. I mean, my son, obviously much younger generation, and the younger generation we know isn't hunting as much, but when he's 26 now, he'll be 27 in a couple of months. And when he was in 7th or 8th grade, we have a great youth weekend here, and you can buy permanent or lifetime hunting licenses for kids. So, 7th grade, they get this new English or gym teacher, and he's a Brit. He's from England, right? And so September, all the kids go back to school, and October, archery season starts. September, bear season, and squirrel and grouse all come in, and rabbit. So he said one day to the class, he's like, "Why does everybody keep talking about this hunting season?" And apparently one of the young girls in the class looked at him and said, because it's awesome. Like, that's the whole explanation. And they started.
Does this guy hunt now?
I don't know whatever happened to him or where he went, but like my son started, he shot his first deer when he was 7. He shot his first turkey when he was 8, and he shot his first bear when he was 11. So, and it's just baked in, and he and all of his buddies, that was their deal, So they were typical teenagers, Playbox, Xbox, PlayStation, all that stuff. And but the minute hunting season was open, that stuff would just start collecting dust. I remember my son and his buddy Ethan, who I hunt a lot with Ethan now that he's an adult. But they were 14 years old, and I was working, and I came home. It was Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day, whatever you want to call it these days. They had the day off from school, and when I got home that afternoon, it was bow season, and there were 2 dead deer hanging in the tree on the next to the driveway on the hanging branch, and they had them half skun out. That's a way better use of time than playing a video game or any of the other things they could have been doing, where some of their friends took bad pathways. They didn't. That whole group of kids that hunted is successful. They're building solid lives. They're all in their own homes which in this economy is pretty intense. But they grew up with a work ethic and a love of the woods and a love of hunting that will carry them through their life,
When you process a deer, are you cutting out roast, or you run it all through a meat grinder?
I don't grind. I don't have a meat grinder. If there's a meat cutter nearby me who makes such excellent sausage that it's not worth me learning how for what he charges. But he'll let me bring a sleeve of meat to him and drop it off. His son, I worked with his son for a little bit, and his son was like, "Yeah, Dad, you're one of the few people Dad doesn't mind because the meat's clean." But at this point, what I do is I just I take it down to the cuts, and like if I've got a big enough deer that I want a couple of packages out of it, I'll just cut the cut in half, and then I vacuum seal everything, and it'll keep forever like that. And by leaving it just as the whole cut, you have less surface area, surface to mass, and it'll keep for years. I mean, I've found packages that were 3 years old, and you open them up and they look brand new. So that's how I do it. It saves on processing time, because then when you take a package out, what do you got to do? You got to cut up a package of steak. You got to take that one cut, do any trimming, slice it into steaks, and you're going. Rather than spending all those extra hours at the table while you're trying to get a deer put up and put away so that you can get back out and hunt some more.
Yeah, I just processed a couple, and first time I did it in a while. Yeah, a rookie like me, I'm sure I waste a ton of meat compared to somebody like you, but I love ground venison.
I love it. I just don't have the ambition for it. My son got a good girl. She loves making burgers. So she told me if I wanted to bring some over, she'd do it up, and I'll probably take her up on that at some point.
How's she gonna make them if it's not ground?
What's that?
How's she gonna make them if it's not ground already?
No, she'll trim it up and grind it.
Oh, she's got a grinder?
She will make the burger and then just give me
Why don't
back
you
packages
just
of burger.
Yeah, why don't you just do that? I think that's gotta be just as easy. I mean, if you have a meat grinder, you get your big piece, then you just cube it into 2 inches, shove it in and go.
Well, the only thing I'm missing by not having burger is hamburgers. Like when I'm doing a stew or a chili, I just chunk it up and away it goes.
Yeah, I like it kinda ground, so I mix mine with some 73% lean ground beef, which is probably pretty fatty stuff, but
Yeah.
I just vacuum seal it in quart bags, so it's like an inch thick, half inch thick probably. Just pull it out, set it out for a couple hours, and thaw it out. It's pretty nice.
You know how that's what she does. She flattens it down like that. But you know how you go into the store, you get some bacon and you're looking for the one that's got the most red meat? We've gone in and you get some good smoked bacon that is like the fattier one, and just throw that in there, and just the venison and the bacon.
That would be pretty good.
It is. Yep. Every burger's a bacon burger.
Now I'm tempted to fry up some burgers tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I ran all day getting ready for the show, so probably gonna be something on the way home. It's probably not gonna be healthy for me.
Yeah. So how long does it take you to skin and debone a deer?
If I go right at it, not long. I mean, that one I shot out in New York, I had some 550 cord. I tied loops in it, found a couple of trees that made a V, and another tree that had a V I could throw the 550 cord over, and jack the thing up, butchered it out. I would say to debone it and have a hanging skeleton there, if I go right at it, an hour.
Geez, that's pretty quick.
Yeah.
I think it took, and they're already skinned. Took me 6, 7 hours, but it is like the first time I really ever done it.
Yeah.
Plus, I pulled them in the shop, and they're defrosting too fast. And once they get a little mushy, it's way harder.
Yeah, I've done a lot of deer. I was keeping a tally for a little bit between like 2012 and 2020, and I shot a lot of deer in that time frame. Like some 6 deer years, that 11 deer year, average like 4 deer a year. And like going into COVID, between my son and my stepfather and I, we shot 8 deer and a bear.
When you debone, are you just cutting off pieces of meat, or do you just get the bone out, worry about the rest later?
It all depends. It depends on the mood I'm in. I like to debone them hanging. Um, the one I got this year got frozen, and then it just sat there frozen for quite a while in the garage. I ended up having to put it in my stepfather's shed to get a small enough space that I could reasonably thaw it out. So once that was done, I got it quartered up and just took the quarter in on the table. And so if I've got the quarter laying on a table, I get all the meat off the bones, and then get the bone out of the way and finish trimming things up.
You probably don't have enough internet speed to watch YouTube at home, but there's a YouTube account called The Bearded Butchers,
Yeah, I'm familiar.
and like their rear hind quarter, they'll do the bare minimum to get down to the bone and
Yep.
like trim around the bone and leave all those main muscles together, get the bone out, and then they'll start separating. Where when I did it, should have watched that video first. I tried cutting off, okay, the top round, okay, now the eye round,
Yep.
and it's pain in the ass.
I've done it both ways. I've probably helped butcher well over 100 deer. So it's just another Tuesday at this point.
Have you ever tried aging deer? Is that what dry aging?
Yeah, I have not, but my son goes out to Pennsylvania, and we've got a relative out there that's got 6 acres, like in Pittsburgh, and they bow hunt that a little bit. And he dry aged some. I can't remember if it was venison or just beef he dry aged, but they tried it last time they were out there. They said it was really good.
The bearded butchers, when they're talking about how they do it, they're like, during peak bow season is probably one of the best time to do it when it gets down below freezing at night, but it's like 40 degrees during the day. I'm like, how is that safe?
Yeah.
I mean, they know, I don't. So
Yep.
I want to try that sometime.
Yeah, I'm not particularly inclined to. I've had dry aged meat. It's fine, but man, I'm pretty basic in terms of once I have a mechanism, a method I like, that's kind of what I do. So when I make a roast, it's pretty much going to come out the same way every time. When I make a stew, it's going to be the same every time. When I make steaks, they're going to be the same almost every time. How do you cook venison steak? One of two ways: you marinate it and grill it, or you get a whole bunch of onions going in a frying pan and in it goes. Right? Um,
You ever make jerky?
I don't, but I've had venison sticks made. Again, there's a guy that makes them so well. I don't have any interest in spending my time trying to figure it out. I would rather just get his product.
I feel the same way about sticks.
Yep.
I'm pretty picky about my sticks, but I might try. I took a couple of roast out and I sliced them 1/4 inch thick, vacuum sealed them. I might try smoking some jerky, see if I can figure it out.
Yeah, I'm probably not. I just, you know, I like what I like. My time is kind of at a premium. Like this week for me, Mondays the legislature doesn't operate, but I still had 2 meetings on Monday. I had a doctor's appointment Monday, and then Monday through Thursday I had, counting this isn't a meeting, but I was 6 to 9 on Monday night, 6 to 8 on Tuesday night, 6 to 8:30 last night. I don't. It's not something I care enough about having to expend that time and energy on that. This week is, you know, this week's an anomaly in terms of the fact that I have no downtime at all this week. Um, could I do it? Yes. Do I have a lot of other things I like to do? Yeah. I've got some cameras in the White Mountains that need my attention. If I had half a day to spare, that's where I'd be headed. I'd rather do that than make jerky.
I get it, man. I got a bunch of unfinished house projects. Like
Yep.
my front door, I painted it a year and a half ago. Did something wrong that's peeling off. Like, I don't have time to fix this. I work full time doing this and I'm trying to start another company, and I get up at 4:30 in the morning and I'm going until about 9:30 at night.
Yep. Yep. So you get it. Yeah, we all make our choices, right? um, we all decide how we're gonna allot our time, and this job is not it's not a 9 to 5, right? Like I worked on an issue in 2020 where I was talking with wildlife managers in Namibia and Europe, and so when those are the conversations you're having, you're asking them to help you by reaching out to your legislature and providing them with information that they don't have, but really need to make an informed decision. If I'm reaching out to you, I got to be on your time, right? So my work day was 2 o'clock in the morning because that was their 8 o'clock or whatever.
How do you reach out to these people if you don't have internet at your house?
I have internet; it just wasn't fast enough to support this.
Can you do Google Meets on it?
I do Teams, I do Zoom. Yeah. I don't know about Google Meets. I've never used that particular format. I like Zoom. But most state agencies are using Teams. Um, you know, I've got more clients than just that one. This is my primary, but I've got other clients. They like to use Teams.
Might have just been timing because this is no different than Teams.
Yeah, yeah. It could have just been timing too. That's one thing in the rural areas around here. Um, as I told you last week when we tried unsuccessfully to do this, it can come and go uh, more than one would think.
So do you work from home a lot?
Um, yes, to a degree. There's a lot of the work that can be done from home, but there's nothing quite like being on deck in the building in the state house. You have to have those relationships with legislators. You have to build relationships throughout the building, because so my currency for me, my currency is people and information. You have to be able to get the information to support the good bills, to combat the bad bills, and then I need people who will engage when there's a bad bill happening to help stop it. I'm without without the folks that line up behind me, I'm one person. With the folks that line up behind me, I'm a force. So there's nothing that I do that's meaningful that is because I'm some superhuman. It's because people believe in the work that I do. At this point, most, I don't know about most, at this point, a large segment of the hunting community in our state is familiar with who I am, what I do. The organization's been around for 25 years doing this work. So the responses I get are, I would go so far as to say, spectacular. In 2021, there was a bill introduced. It would have ended hound hunting for bears would have been entirely done. No ifs, ands, or buts. And trapping would have been reduced to nuisance trapping only. And you had to follow all these parameters and do all this other stuff and have a special license. I think there was a clause in there that said you had to take the beaver and his wife to dinner and ask them if it was okay. And, it's just ridiculous. And
Say that again.
it was a joke that you had to take the beaver to dinner and ask if it was okay to trap them. So the sponsor of that bill, who was never friendly to our community, he got on. It was April 1st of that year, and he got on the meeting and he said, "Look, we might hear from 3 or 4 or 5 constituents on a bill. If it's a really exciting bill, we might hear from 10. And we've gotten 471 emails about this bill. And that's not an ask. That's a mandate from the public. We have to pass this bill." Well, I tried diligently. I don't overuse my email list. And I know there's this sense, right, that you need to constantly put yourself in front of your constituency or your viewership or whatever term you're using, in order to stay relevant. I have not found that to be the case because the work that we do through my organization is so relevant that people are incredibly responsive. Like in the industry, they say that if you have a 17% open rate on your emails, you're doing really well, right? That's kind of the standard. My open rates are like 48 to 50% when I send an email out because I don't do the every week begging for money thing. I'm probably the only person who's running an organization that relies on donations and raffles. And on the end of my email, it doesn't say donate here. Because when I send those emails out, there's a reason. It says this is what's happening. And if you want to avert this, you have to act now. And then it gives them the tools they need to act effectively on their own behalf. So 2 years ago, there was a bill that would have completely rewritten the structure of our Fish and Wildlife Board, which sets all the regulations for how we, the methods of take, um, to some degree, well, actually on everything except for regular season deer, it sets the season lengths and dates. It's basically season lengths, dates, bag limits, and method of take, right? And the anti-hunting crowd has been screaming for years that they should be on the Fish and Wildlife Board because the Fish and Wildlife Board has a very narrow scope, right? That only relates to hunting. And they're saying, well, wildlife's a public resource. We should be on that board. But they only want to be on that board to try to stop hunting, fishing, and trapping, which are the tools that the wildlife department is able to use to manage populations. We're seeing significant changes in our deer rules this coming year, or well, this year now, 2026, because they're using it as a management tool. And they have a legal directive to provide access to wildlife for those of us who choose to use it, right? So these people had this bill that would have essentially made it would have reduced the board. We have 14 counties. Right now, every county has a representative on the board. This would have reduced the number of board members to 12, and then it would have created a situation where like 8 of them would have been anti-hunting or non-hunting individuals. And I don't have to explain that any farther for you to see what a terrible idea it is. Towards the end of the legislative session, the bill was going to be taken up for a vote on a Friday. Myself and a group of other individuals it was a broad coalition of people that had a bunch of different concerns with some stuff that was going on in our legislature, which is annual event, right? So we put together a press conference in the State House in the Cedar Creek room, and we urged people to show up early and talk to their legislators. Well, that building got so packed on a weekday. People took time off from work and they came down, and there were hundreds of people that showed up. And my coworker in this realm walked around the building and said there was nowhere in the building, the farthest reaches, you could hear the crowd. The lunchroom, people couldn't find a place to sit. And that afternoon, that bill was taken off of the agenda, and it never went back onto an agenda.
Just because the sheer number of people that showed up?
Because of the sheer number of people that showed up. And that's something that, if there was any message I wanted to give hunters writ large out of this podcast, show up, get engaged. I've seen so many times on a hunting page where people are like, we just want to tell deer stories and see pictures of deer. And I know that's what your email was pretty much, stay away from work stuff. And I get that. But even if you don't have an interest in politics, politics has an interest in you, and politicians decide what we can and cannot do. And so we have to be engaged. So I would urge everybody to get involved with a local group, a state level group, with the notable exception of the Sportsman's Alliance. I am not particularly enamored of any of the national groups. I've seen the Sportsman's Alliance time and again put their money where their mouth is, including they helped us sue the National Fish and Wildlife Service because one of the refuges here, they implemented some rules on the refuge that restricted hunting, and they didn't go through the proper public process, right? They breached the Administrative Procedures Act in doing it.
I just thought of this. So turning point, there should be a turning point for hunting.
I'm
sure there are.
I think it's out there, but and that's why I say, like, I hope every state has an organization like this, right?
I know, but there's still the thing about turning point is it's not just like one state organization. Like, they're more localized, and I'm sure there are groups, but it's still not the same.
Well, so there are two different types of national groups, and I should clarify that, right? There are conservation groups, and then there are advocacy groups. The conservation groups are all doing great work, whether it's Whitetails Unlimited, NWTF, RMEF, pick your poison on that. Rough Grouse Society does incredible work. Ducks Unlimited, Delta Waterfowl, right? All those conservation-based national organizations are incredibly valid, but I just haven't seen the advocacy organizations show up in most cases with anything more than a handout for donations when there's a trouble in a state. And like I said, I've seen Sportsman's Alliance, I've seen actually like putting their money where their mouth is. We could not have sued the Fish and Wildlife Service without their support. Maine wouldn't have won their bear referendum without their support. That's real tangible stuff. But if every state does not have an umbrella organization like this, like my members are the Bowhunters Association, the Bear Hounds Association, the Lake Champlain Retriever Club. Um, we've got Rough Grouse Society does their own thing, and they're not a member per se, but we've got Rough Grouse Society members who strongly support us. When NWTF's doing an event, we put it out there. The Trappers Association, a huge one. That local nexus is the most important thing, because when a politician is deciding whether to vote for or against a bill, they don't care about anybody who's not going to be able to vote for or against them particularly. There's the easy, a lot of organizations use the easy bump emails, right? Like you get that alert. This is happening in Colorado. And so sign your name here and put your town in, and we'll send this to all your reps. Those get thrown in the circular file. They're great if you want volume, but if you want meaning, I've got a clip that I've saved of one of our representatives, and she was talking about a bill, not hunting related bill, but on the floor, she said, I've got hundreds of emails about this, and most of them I can tell are generated, but there are a few of them that I can tell are handwritten, heartfelt by an individual. So I always tell people, you don't have to be able to write a novel, and if your grammar's not perfect, it's fine. You have to write something that says, this is me, I'm a real person, this is how it's going to affect me. And that, 6 of those is worth 60 of the computer generated ones. And then picking up the phone to call your legislator and actually having a phone conversation with them, that ratchets it up another notch, right? And when you show up in the building, to bring this full circle, when you take time out of your daily schedule and you go to your capital and you say, I'm me and I'm here and this is where I live and I'm looking for such and such and I want to talk to them. The amount of effort that takes shows a legislator how meaningful this is to you. So I don't want to harp on that too long, but be involved and be involved with a reputable state level organization that's really doing that advocacy work. And if your state doesn't have one, that's what it needs. There's so much variance between states in terms of how much pressure they are under, right? So things that in Illinois are seeing no pressure against them at all might be the things that I'm in a tooth and nail fight over. Hunters, now that we're all globally connected, right, by this internet, they also need to be cognizant of what's going on in other states. And because you may have no anti-hunting stuff in your state at all, but you're gonna. And so you should be cognizant of what that looks like. Anyways, that's enough of me going off on work stuff.
No, it's good insight. That's not work stuff. That's community stuff.
I can stand on a soapbox about it all day long. And I never would have thought I would be doing this, right? If you had told me 10 years ago this would be my role, I would have told you were nuts. I'm a steel worker. So I go make things. I'm a machinist. And I worked with my hands my whole life. I remember, my first, I was probably 3 or 4 weeks into my first legislative session, and I looked down and my hands were spotless. That's a really weird thing to have a moment of panic about, right? But I was a kid. I grew up playing in the dirt. I grew up working on cars, working on farms. I've worked with my hands my entire life. And then suddenly I was like, wait a minute, these aren't my hands. These are some suit's hands.
You're a suit now, man.
It's me. I'm the suit, man. I had a friend on the Fish and Wildlife Board, and I walked in there the first time wearing a suit, and she and I couldn't make eye contact because it would have been really unprofessional when we both just burst out laughing. But I'm 8 years in now. I've fallen into the role well enough that people appreciate me and support me. And it's funny to me that after 25 years, there are still hunters in the state that have never heard of the organization, and that's fine. This summer I'm going to make a big push to go out and meet them where they're at. Last year, the architect of that bill to change the Fish and Wildlife Board with the election coming up, spent time talking to people about how they could organize in his neck of the woods, and he's no longer a legislator. He's a 20-year sitting senator, and he's not there anymore. I think that I know that people, especially our folks, get really frustrated and feel like there's nothing they can do. But I will tell you, and I will tell all of your viewers, I watch it work. I watch it happen when everybody gets together and takes that time to write that email or to show up. I mean, we had a second rally 2 weeks later, and uh, an equal number of people showed up. And there were a lot of people that took, you know, 2 weeks in a row. How much vacation time do you get? What do you want to do with your vacation time, right? You want to be at the lake. You want to be in the woods. You want to be with your family. People used up 2 vacation days, 2 weeks apart, and showed up. And that is incredibly meaningful. At the second rally, I announced that we've always been apolitical, but that year we were going to be talking to people about elections, and we did. And a, a former senator and a strong advocate for the outdoor community announced that he would be running for lieutenant governor, and he won. He's the first challenger to unseat an incumbent lieutenant governor in the state of Vermont in 209 years.
Really?
You know, several seats changed, and two senators, long running senators who had not been friends of the outdoor community, lost their seats. Another individual who is prominent in one of the anti-hunting groups was running for a seat as representative, and he got absolutely blown out in his primary and never even got to run for the seat proper. So the sporting community can do it, and I get that every state has different challenges and every state has different participation rates. And I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe Vermont is like fourth or fifth in participation per capita. We're right up there, so that obviously helps. But we can't. I think we've come to a place where we throw up our hands and we say they don't listen to us anyways. And you might be right. They might not listen to Mike Covey. They might not listen to Mitchell Fox, but they'll listen to all of us. And when all of us show up and all of us say, hey, when they get 1,000 emails dumping into their inbox that this is a bad idea and we're going to remember it come election season, that wakes people up. That changes the dynamic.
Yeah, that's great insight. Going back to Iowa, everybody knows the conservation groups.
Yep.
But I don't know what the advocacy groups are.
I bet you the conservation groups do. And if you don't have one, then, there's a model for it. I'm happy to talk with anybody about what we do and how we're organized. And it's just a matter of pulling all of those groups together. That's all you're doing, right? The trappers, bear hounds, bow hunters, these are all conservation groups, right? And we all care about the resource, contrary to what the antis say about us, right? You're not out there because you hate wildlife. You're out there because you love it. We all do. We're all fascinated by it. We love that contact. We love that intimacy of being in its world and of becoming good enough at being in its world to have that point of contact, right? So if all of those people with that mindset get together and acknowledge the value of what we do, which is very real, think about trappers. Any wildlife department can tap into their trapping community and they can say, we want Fisher samples from Orange County because we're concerned about parvovirus there. Can you provide them for us? The state of Vermont has about 600 licensed trappers. How are you going to replace that capacity to touch that resource and get data, solid data like biological sampling? You can't do that. A Fish and Wildlife Department can't possibly replicate that. We need to look out for it. We need to acknowledge the value of what we do, and we need to all be engaged.
Need to pass it on. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. There is one more thing we need to cover.
All right.
I can't let you off the hook. Every guest has to share, preferably one or two, of their most embarrassing moments from the woods, most embarrassing hunting stories.
I absolutely love that. Where to start? I would say one comes to mind immediately, and it's I headed to New Hampshire with my buddy Ethan to go hunting, and we weren't really feeling the mountain, so we found this little piece of public land, and we're looking at maps, and I'm like, dude, why don't we go check that out? It's only 30 acres, 35 acres. Why would we bother? I'm like, look, it's all surrounded by ag fields. There's crop there. It's got to be deer, man. It's a little strip of woods down by the river. Got to be deer. So we drive down in there and we pull up and we're just sitting there talking. And it's like 9 in the morning. And he's like, I'm telling you, this is a waste of time. And like, it was 6 or 7 deer come out of the woods. One was a buck, like right in front of us. Like they, wanted to prove me right, which was spectacular. So we're like, all right, how do we approach this? Well, what if we each go in from one end or the other? So he drops me off up on one end. He goes down to the other end. Worked out great. We had never been in there. He got the miserable end. I got the good end. And on the way over, I realized I forgot my release. So we stop at the Walmart. I grab a release. It's a different release, right? And we we head into the woods. I'm still hunting towards him. He's still hunting towards me. I see some deer coming, so I stop, set up. I'm down in a little dry wash, right? So I'm really well concealed. And this doe comes walking. She's 20 yards, and I pull the bow back to draw, and that arrow is still somewhere on the planet. I'm just not sure of where. It was going through treetops the last time I saw it.
Really?
The release was a cheap release, and it just didn't hold on my D loop, right? So my D loop was probably a little worn too, mea culpa. But so deer looks around, does not move. And and I run Luminox. So I grab another arrow, I clip on, I'm like, come on. And I draw the bow and I get almost all the way back, and the same thing happens, and that arrow cranks into a beech tree like 6 feet above that deer's head. And that deer still stands there. So I've given up at this point, and I take my phone out and I take a picture of my Luminoc 6 feet above that deer and like 3 feet to the right in that tree with the deer, and I sent him the FML text and got back a lot of laughing emojis. That's definitely one of them.
Did he know what happened when you sent the picture?
We talked about it later, and that only made it more entertaining for him. So the other one I would say is I was in New Hampshire and I was duck hunting one day. I was duck hunting in the morning in New Hampshire. And I was making these like wild shots. Like I shot a black duck out of the sky at like 70 yards. We were jump shooting off beaver ponds, right? So we come up on this beaver pond, and these two mergansers take off. They're like 40 yards out, going opposite directions, as fast as mergansers can go, which is plenty. And I'm like, bam, dump them both, right? And excellent. Get back home to Vermont, and I'm like, man, I am on fire. So I call one of my buddies up. I'm like, dude, let's go walk the valley and walk the river and see if we can pop up some ducks. I am unstoppable today. And telling him all this awesome shooting I've done, right? And so we're walking down the brook, and I don't know if you duck hunt at all or not, but or if you jump shoot at all, if you do, but we jump these mallards off, and a mallard will come up almost like a woodcock, like kind of straight up, pick a direction and go. So this mallard's popping, this nice drake, he's popping straight up like 20 yards in front of me, and I mag dumped and never touched him. Like the easiest possible shot.
That's what you get for hyping yourself up.
That's it. One other one that comes to mind, the third one that immediately comes to mind, I'll give you that one in case the first one was not entertaining enough, was we went over to my uncle's farm to go woodchuck hunting. And we pull in, and like way out in the field, a couple 100 yards, there's this, is that a woodchuck or not? Is that a cow pile, right? And so my buddy's shooting a 7mm mag for long shots, and I've got my little Ruger 1022. And he's like, well, you shoot at it, and if it moves, it couldn't tell. It's either a dirt clod or a cow pile or a woodchuck. So I pulled up and I did some Kentucky windage, and I shoot, and he goes, well, it's not a woodchuck because you hit it. This is like ridiculously far out, 250 yards probably. We come walking up over a rise in the field, and there's a woodchuck standing with his back to us at like 30 feet. I shot 3 times before he finally shot it with the 7mm mag. So
this is the one you shot at the first time?
No, the first time it was a cow pile is what it was. But I hit it at like ridiculous range for no good reason, just guessing. And then we came up on one at like 30 yards, and I couldn't touch it.
Was there just a lot of woodchucks around there?
Yeah, there's plenty. There used to be less back when I was younger and hunted them all the time.
We have woodchucks, but if you went looking for one, you'd never find it. You only see them when you're not looking for them.
Oh, really? Oh, no. No, that was a big deal, man. Uh, Teens, early 20s, woodchuck hunting. And they're good eating.
I'll stick to whatever I have now.
When I was in college, a gray squirrel ran across in front of me and my new roomies from Boston, both of them. They were like, "Oh, it's so cute." I said, "Man, those taste good." "What do they taste like?" It tastes a little bit like rabbit." "Well, what's rabbit taste like?" Tastes a little bit like woodchuck."
I'll have to try it sometime.
Yeah. So I just got the low battery threat.
Good time to wrap this up, I suppose.
Yes, sir. It's been a pleasure.
Glad we could make it work. We'll definitely have to stay in touch.
Yeah, for sure.